welcome to Science Isn't Scary Out and About. I'm Miss Lisa for the Fayette County Public Library. Today I am with Jason Waterman and we are at Schrader Weaver Natural Preserve, and there's several trails here to hike in the woods, and he works for the DNR and he is a forester. So Jason, can you tell us exactly what you do, what your job is?
Well, I work with private landowners to help them understand a little bit about the forest resource that they own, help them realize some of the issues that may be out here, that how well the trees are growing, or if there's some health issues, things that they could do to help the forest be better for wildlife or whatever, so that they can then make decisions to manage the property to provide what it is that they want and yet keep this ecosystem very healthy.
So this property was homesteaded by James Weaver in 1822. So boys and girls, if you could do your math, that's 200 years ago. And he did not let anyone come in here to touch his trees, except for during World War I, some of the government people came and took some of the poplar trees to make propellers for the airplanes. So what we're going to see today are lots of very big trees, some old growth trees, and Jason here is going to help us identify some of the things that you might see when you come out here on the trail. All right, boys and girls, if you come down this trail, you'll see that some of these things are numbered. Jason here is a very good expert at identifying trees by the bark, and the bark is what's here on the outside of a tree. So Jason, can you tell us about this tree right here?
Certainly. This is what's called an American beech.
Okay.
Very common in our forests throughout Indiana. Big characteristic for this is it has this really smooth bark. Bark is kind of a light gray in color and such. And unfortunately, this is a species that a lot of people carve their initials in and such. And so you'll oftentimes see them where they've been scarred like that. And the scar will remain with the tree for the rest of its life. So it's not a good thing for the tree. It does injure the tree and such. But this is American beech, very common. It is widely used by a lot of wildlife. It does produce small little nuts, which a lot of animals will feed upon. It also has a tendency to form cavities in there for raccoons and owls and things like that to live in.
So would you say this was a softwood then, since they can carve easily into it, or not?
Actually, no. It's a relatively hard wood. It's actually also very good for firewood. There's a lot of energy stored in that produces a lot of good heat. So yeah, it's actually relatively strong. Okay. But it's not something that's used a lot for like furniture or anything like that. So. But it's a good species as part of our forest environment.
Great. All right, let's go keep walking and see what else we could find. Well, Jason, look at this area right here where there's no trees. There's all this green, lush plants. What is all this stuff that's growing here?
Well, this is a very common wildflower. It's called stinging nettle. The flower itself's not all that pretty. But one of the big features of this is the fact that it is covered in the leaves, the stem, everything are covered with these tiny little hairs. And those hairs actually are kind of like little needles. And if you brush up against it, it will inject a chemical into your skin, and it hurts. It itches, and you'll know you got into it instantly. So this is very common in our forests. So stay on the trails and such. It's not going to cause a major rash or something like poison ivy would, but it is definitely uncomfortable. So stay on the trails, and you'll be okay. All right.
Yep, great. Wow, Jason, look at this tree. I don't think I can reach all the way around it. This must be really, really old. Can you identify it and tell us a little bit how you age trees?
This is an oak. Specifically, it's called Bur Oak. It likes growing in really rich, slightly damp areas. And as you can see, we're right here by this little creek. So this is obviously a really good place for it. It is very, very old. As you can tell, it is quite large. And every year, a tree grows a little bit. And when it does that, inside, underneath the bark, it actually puts down what we call a ring. The cells in the wood are slightly different based on when it's in the spring versus later in the summer. And that difference makes this ring that we talk about. And if you count those rings, if you see a tree that's fallen down or a stump or something like that, you can actually count how many years old that particular tree was. We'll never know know for sure how old this tree is unless it gets cut off and we can count those rings. But he has been here for a very, 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 very long time. So probably well over 200 years old would be my guess, but we'll never know for sure.
Right. Wow. Cool, Jason. Let's take a look at this tree. It has a very unique bark. It looks like little teeny tiny pieces of like burnt Rice Krispies.
Yep. This is called black cherry. Some people refer to it as wild cherry, but it is a common species across our landscape out here, and it has had this very distinctive bark. It is the bark is quite dark and with this kind of a scaly texture to it. There's really not a whole lot else that looks like this. As a cherry, it does produce a fruit. And technically you could eat it, but it's mostly seed and not all that good for us. But wildlife love this. Birds eat the seed very, very readily and spread it far and wide. This is the species that they use to make furniture from. So cherry furniture and such like that, that is made
sort of reddish, right?
Yes, it's a reddish color.
Very nice.
And such. So yeah, it's a very common species.
Nice big tall.
And such. So yeah, beautiful, beautiful tree.
Beautiful tree. All right, let's keep going, see what else we can find. All right, Jason, right here in this area, we have this dead tree that goes up some over here. We have another tree over on this side that is just laying down and is all dead. Dead trees are good for the forest, aren't they?
Yes, so obviously while the tree is alive, it's producing food for animals and stuff like that. But even after it's dead, the tree provides important resources that animals will use. So in this situation, if you look way up at the top, there are these holes the woodpeckers have made. They've been looking for bugs and such that are inside the wood, and they've made these holes. So other animals then will come and use those holes as nesting sites and such. So the dead tree, while it's standing, is important for certain species like owls and things. But after the tree has fallen, the tree itself slowly starts to decay and all the nutrients and everything get recycled. And you may see mushrooms or something growing on there. That's what's going on with that. But the dead tree on the ground provides important structure that other species of wildlife need. So things like chipmunks and skinks and stuff like that utilize this dead material as their homes as well. So even after the tree has died, it still provides very important resources out here to all the species.
Yeah, that's neat. Here's a tree that has fallen. Jason, do we see rings in it?
Yes, you can. The tree fell over the trail, and so it was cut so we could continue to walk through here. But this gives us an opportunity to look at the inside of the trunk. And you can see this alternating layer of dark and light, dark and light. That is the ring that we're talking about. The lighter color was put down in early spring when there's lots of water and everything. The tree's growing really well. And then the darker area are cells that grow in the heat of the summer when there's not so much water and everything just grows a little more slowly. But if you count from, like, say, light band to light band, that's 1 year's growth. So you could actually start way out here at the beginning and 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to the center and find out how old the tree was that way.
Very cool. So there's probably at least 50 on that one.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And you can tell that certain areas the tree grew very slowly because the rings are very close together.
Right.
And in other areas the tree was growing quite rapidly because the rings are farther apart.
Very cool. Hey, Jason, look at this. Is this a shelf mushroom?
It is. There are a lot of different types of mushrooms that we find out here. This is one that grows out away from the trunk of the tree, and hence it's called a shelf mushroom because it makes this kind of shelf-like thing. The mushroom itself is inside, slowly decaying the wood, and then this part that we see out here is its actual part that produces spores to grow new mushrooms somewhere else. Sometimes people call this an artist's conch because this whitish part underneath, people will use that and they'll draw on it and make like little pictures with it and such. So yeah, it's a naturally found mushroom out here. It's just part of that whole recycling system that nature has, and it's kind of neat. It is not something to eat, though. This is not a very pleasant thing, and that's true of most mushrooms out here. There are some of them that are quite deadly, very poisonous. Others that are just not good, and there are a few that are quite tasty. But don't eat mushrooms unless you are an absolute expert on what it is, because one small accident and that's it. But
Yeah.
this is one of the shelf mushrooms here.
Very cool. Hey Jason, this is really cool. This is such a tiny little tree. I could wrap up my finger all the way around it. We call these baby trees a sapling, right?
Correct. So saplings, all trees were saplings at one point in time, no matter how big they may be. They used to be little ones and such. But this happens to be sugar maple.
Okay.
So if you like maple syrup on your pancakes and such, it comes from this species. If you're familiar with Canada's flag, this is the leaf that's on that flag. This is one of our most common species throughout the entire eastern United States, actually. And most of our forests have a tremendous number of sugar maple saplings in the understory. Sugar maple can tolerate a lot of shade, and obviously a forest floor has a lot of shade on it, and so the sugar maple saplings thrive in this kind of an environment. On this side of the trail, though, we have one that's a little bit older and such. The bark is kind of tight and such, not real smooth like that beech was and such. But this is something that is certainly big enough that if somebody would want to tap to make maple syrup, they could. They just drill a small hole into it, insert a spigot called a spile, and then collect the sap from that. And then they would have to boil the sap to concentrate the sugars to make it into syrup.
So do trees have to be a certain age before you can get the syrup out of them?
It's not so much age as it is size.
Oh, okay. So this one would be big enough to tap?
Certainly.
Wow.
It could be tapped. And this species is also used a lot for furniture and flooring and such. So if you've ever gone bowling or been to a basketball court, you've seen maple flooring and such. It's a very pretty, very beautiful wood and such. So yeah.
Cool. You know a lot about trees. All right, I got my maple leaf. Hey Jason, look, I found a mayapple. Can you tell us a little bit more about this plant?
Well, May apples are a wildflower, very common wildflower. They have this kind of an umbrella-shaped leaf and such. Some of them, if you look at them, actually will have two leaves on the stem, and those are the ones that will actually bloom. And then once it's bloomed, that will develop into this little fruit called a May apple. A lot of wildlife eat those and such. Sometimes, though, the stem will just have one individual leaf only like this, and this one doesn't bloom.
Oh, okay.
It's not quite developed fully enough to bloom yet.
Yeah.
Give it some time, though, and it will.
Yeah, I just think they're so cool because they look like umbrellas. And
They are.
They hide the little fruit.
They typically grow in little clumps, so you'll see a patch of May apple, and if you look earlier in the spring, it'll be blooming, and this time of year you might find some fruit on it.
Yep. So cool. All right. All right, boys and girls, the state tree of Indiana is the tulip poplar. And Jason tells me that this right here is a tulip poplar, but then there's also one back there and back there and back there and back there. So there are a lot of tulip poplars here in this wood. So tell us more about the tulip poplar.
Well, this is a species that has actually several common names. Tulip poplar is one of them. Some people will call it tulip tree, and some people will call it yellow poplar. So if you hear me say tulip or poplar, it's all the same species. But this is it. This is our state tree of Indiana. They typically grow very, very tall, very, very straight, and they are one of our fastest growing trees in this part of the world. They are used for trim and molding in our homes. Sometimes drawers for our cabinets and such. The sides of the drawers will be made out of tulip poplar. The wood is a little on the softer side, so it's not going to be used for like a dining room table or something, but it certainly has a lot of good uses to it. It does produce a flower that looks somewhat like a tulip, and those are the petals from that. And so then the seed that eventually develops is a little helicopter-like seed as well and such. But unlike the sugar maple that can tolerate a lot of shade, tulip poplar is the exact opposite. It needs a lot of sunlight. And so the only time tulip poplar can regenerate, those seeds sprout and grow, is when there's a lot of light that reaches the forest floor. So after a major storm comes through and a lot of trees are blown down, the tulip poplar take advantage of that opportunity to regenerate. And then they shoot up to the sky,
yes,
and that's why we have these tall, straight trees.
That's so neat. Wow. Trees are awesome, aren't they, boys and girls?
Well, here's a fun little sapling we found. There's a little patch of sunlight getting in here, which has allowed this one to grow. But this is called blue ash. The leaf is different from what you've seen before. This is what we call a compound leaf. This is all one leaf, and it's got multiple parts to it. These are leaflets, and together they all make one large leaf. There are several species that have these compound leaves, the ashes being one of them. But this is called blue ash, and there's a kind of a neat little thing about blue ash. If you look at the twig has edges to it, and actually if you feel it, it feels square.
Really?
It is the only species of tree that we have with square twigs. Now as the tree eventually grows, that squareness slowly fades away and it looks normal and such. But yeah, so if you see a tree with twigs that are square and a compound leaf, it is a blue ash.
Blue ash.
The name blue comes from a use. Our pioneer forefathers knew how to extract a blue dye out of the bark. I'm not sure how they did that, but somebody works at the library and can
I should figure that out, right?
But that's blue ash. This part of Indiana, the Whitewater Valley here, blue ash is very, very common. Other parts of Indiana, less so. But this is one of our native ashes. And while a lot of the ashes have died from the emerald ash borer, blue ash does have some natural resistance to it. And so it will continue to be part of our forests for decades and decades to come. So
cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, Jason, isn't this something unique that you can find on the forest floor? Isn't this a wildflower type thing?
Yeah, this is a wildflower. It's called Jack in the Pulpit. It has a very unique flower. It's kind of like a little cup, and then it has a part of it grows up over top of it. And then inside that is this little, it's called a pistil. It's just part of the flower and such. And so the pistil is Jack, and the cup is the pulpit.
So yeah, so it looks like there's a little person inside.
This grows in very rich, fertile forests that are kind of on the damper side of things. But after it's bloomed, it will then develop a cluster of berries here. They're green right now, but eventually they'll turn bright red and such. And this is just a very common wildflower in our forest, but it only grows in really good, rich sites. So it's a pretty neat one to find.
Yep, so
and this is a very large one.
Yeah,
actually.
it is. Yep. So look out for these, kids. This will be fun to find. All right, Jason, what about this? Is this another compound leaf?
It is. This is a different type of a compound leaf. This is what they call a palmately compound leaf. So let me break it off here. So again, we've got this is all one leaf. This is the stem or petiole. But the leaflets all attach at one spot, kind of like the fingers on your hand.
Yeah, very different from this one.
Correct. Specifically, this is an Ohio buckeye. So this is the mascot for the state of Ohio or Ohio State University and such. This is actually a fairly common tree in a lot of our forest understories. It's one of the very first things to leaf out in the spring and such. But it is also one of the very first things to drop its leaves in the fall. And sometimes if we have a really dry summer, it will actually drop its leaves even in August and such. It just hangs out here in the understory. It does produce a nut, a buckeye, which some people carry around in their pocket as a good luck charm and such. But yeah, this is the only species of tree that has this palmately compound leaf like that.
Oh, that's fascinating. So. Cool. Well, boys and girls, I'm collecting leaves. We're going to have a little quiz at the end, so try to remember what we're talking about. All right, let's see what else we can find. Well, here, Jason, we seem to be in a little patch of a whole bunch of little saplings. What are all these cute little trees with this ginormous leaf?
Yeah, these are called pawpaws. They are a small native species. They just are small saplings. They don't get to be large, large trees. But they have these very large leaves. Most of the species that are in this family actually grow in the tropics.
Oh.
But this one makes it this far north, and as you can kind of look at it, it looks a little like it should be in the tropics. This actually does make a fruit that some people really like. Some people refer to it as the Indiana banana. Unlike a banana, this does have big seeds inside of it and such, but it has a flavor that's kind of reminiscent of a banana and such. One of the neat things about pawpaw, though, is its smell. So if you crush this up and smell it, it will either smell like a green bell pepper or like diesel fuel.
Ooh, I think it smells more like fuel.
Diesel fuel. Yep.
Ugh.
So that's one of the ways that we can use to identify certain species is by using their smell.
Great.
So it's not just what it looks like. Sometimes we use our other senses as well. But this is pawpaw, just a natural found species here. Forms little colonies, little groves like this. It blooms in early May, and then the fruit will be ready in the latter part of the fall.
Yep. Very cool. Well, look here, boys and girls. Look how unique this bark is. It's very pretty, and it's got a really nice pattern to it. What kind of tree is this, Jason?
This is one of our hickories. Hickories are kind of divided into two groups. We have the tight bark hickory, which this is one of, and then we have the shagbark hickories. But there are many species in each one of those groups, and specifically this one is called Bitternut Hickory. And as the name implies, the nuts are very, very, very bitter. Nobody wants to eat these. They taste bad. And so in the fall and early part of the winter, the animals out here are eating the beech nuts and the walnuts and all the other food that's pretty abundant. But when you get into, like, say, February and such, they've eaten all of the tasty stuff, and the only thing that's left is this. So it is a good species to provide that food during the leanest part of the winter to help them survive. So it's a neat species to have out here. And if you have hickory flooring or hickory cabinets or something, it would be made out of these tight bark hickories.
Cool.
So pretty cool.
All right, this is one of my favorites. This is that shagbark hickory. Take a look at this bark. Tell us more about it, Jason.
Well, as the name implies, the bark is very, very shaggy. It peels off in these sheets and such. It is a very important species for wildlife. It produces hickory nuts, which are very tasty. So unlike the bitternut hickory we looked at before, this one is very, very sought after and is eaten quite readily by almost everything out here. The unique thing about this, though, is the bark. The bark peels off in these sheets like this and such, so it's very, very distinctive. This is a species that you can identify very easily because there's really nothing that is shaggy like this. Oddly enough, though, a lot of our bats in the summertime actually will roost up underneath those little pieces of bark like that and such, and so there may be bats up there sleeping right now. And then they'll come out at night to go find mosquitoes and things like that and such. So this is an important species from a wildlife perspective and such. From a timber point of view, we do use it for things like handles for hoes and shovels and stuff like that. It doesn't get quite as nice of a finish to it for like cabinetry and such. But we do certainly have its uses and such for us as well. But it's certainly something that wildlife depend upon.
Yeah, it's sort of fun to look straight up and see all of the little pieces just hanging off of the bark of the tree or the trunk.
Pretty cool tree.
Yeah. All right, Jason over here is standing by a huge tree. Jason, tell us about this ginormous tree in this woods.
Well, this is a black walnut, so walnut furniture and such would be made out of this. The black walnut itself is a nut that people sometimes eat. Squirrels absolutely love them. But this particular tree is kind of special. This was at one time the largest known walnut in the state of Indiana. And we had to come out here and measure it to see how big it is to determine that. So we actually measure this at 4.5 feet above the ground. We get a tape measure and measure the circumference, the distance around the trunk. I also measure the height of the tree and then how far out the branches spread and such. And we get those measurements and add them all together and determine how big this particular tree is, so we can determine if it's the actual largest one in the state of Indiana. It was for many, many, many years, and then somebody found one that was a little bit bigger. So he's no longer the reigning champion, but if he lives long enough and the other one should die, he'll reclaim the throne. But this is black walnut. It also has a compound leaf, somewhat similar to the ashes. And if you see here where the bark has been scuffed up, the inside of the bark is a dark chocolate color, and that's pretty distinctive for walnut. There's not many other species that have that. But this is one of the largest walnuts you're ever going to see.
It needs a blue ribbon on it. All right, we have finished our hike, and I have gathered a whole bunch of leaves. I'm going to have Jason hold these, and he's going to hold them up, and let's see if I can remember everything we talked about today. All right, this was the pawpaw that has the little yellow Indiana banana fruit on it.
Yep.
Okay, what else we have? This one is the one that's circular, so it's the Ohio buckeye.
Very good.
Yay, 2 out of 2. All right, this was the May apple. It was close to the ground with the little fruit on it. Oh, this is my favorite, the tulip poplar, Indiana state tree. And oh, this was blue ash.
Very good.
Blue ash with the compound leaf. And then our sugar maple. I did well, boys and girls. I hope you learned a lot, because I sure did. I'm Miss Lisa for the Fayette County Public Library, and I've been here with Jason Waterman today, and this has been Science Isn't Scary Out and About.